Thank you, Rhonda. I think we're up now. Hello, everyone. My name is Charlie Schick, and I'm in charge of marketing for IBM's big data products towards healthcare and life sciences. And today I want to tell you a little bit about our IBM Netezza data warehouse appliances, what's so special about them, and I have some examples of how organizations are using our data warehouses appliances in healthcare and life sciences. So what is IBM Netezza? Netezza invented the concept of a purpose-built analytical machine, the data warehouse appliance. And what we've done is we've tightly integrated the database, server, and storage into one tightly knit machine. And I'll show you some examples of the technical architecture later. And this is not just parts working together, but a real tight melding of the hardware and the software. Netezza is open, has open standard interfaces like JDBC, ODBC, SQL, SAS, SPSS, C++, and R. And all this leads to a lower total cost of ownership and easy setup for you. Now, the Netezza data warehouse appliance is very fast. We normally see 10 to 100 times faster than traditional systems. And it's very simple to use. Typically, people have less than one full-time employee working on it, and usually you don't need a database analyst. And so I have lots of examples of that. Also, it's very scalable. If you need more speed or capacity, you just add more. It's linearly scalable so that if you double the amount of Netezza racks that you have, you double the performance and you double the capacity. And all you get is just one machine because it's an appliance. And finally, it comes with IBM Netezza Analytics, but you can also use other analytics tools that operate through the standard interfaces. Now, going into a little bit more detail for the different types of people who would be interested in Netezza. For example, in operations, it's just simple to load and go. Usually we can set you up within a day or two, and you can already start analyzing your data as it loads. For the developers and the DBAs, and this is one of our key differentiators, is because of the way the system is set up, there's very little indexing or tuning. That you don't have to do too much configuration or any sort of physical modeling. It's data model agnostic, and therefore the data architects and your DBAs who traditionally were working hard to keep a data warehouse up, they can go off and provide business value somewhere else. And another area that I want to point out is because it's so fast, for business analysts, we like to say it's train of thought analysis. And you can do these ad hoc queries without having to worry about going back to the database and tuning and indexing. Also, because of the way Netezza, the boxes are set up, you can analyze the full data set rather than subsets of data. And so therefore you can get a fuller view of what you're trying to analyze. And finally, it's very easy when you set it up and you start loading your data, you can start querying immediately. And typically what we have is when we're setting it up within a day, the people start loading their data, the customers start loading their data and already start doing queries against that data. In this slide, slide 4, is what I call our no slide. These are things that you don't have to do that you typically have to do on a database. Of course, if you think about the history of databases, they come from a time where you're trying all these different ways to do analytics on large sets of data with very little processing power or storage space. And so over the course of history, we created all these tricks to make our databases run faster. Well, because Netezza is so simple and so fast, you don't have to do things like manage RAID partitions or manage temp space or do any sort of indexing or any sort of futzing with the database. And instead, what that allows to happen is the database analyst can go off and do some important things, like building applications and handling the data in ways that you couldn't do before. So how do we do this? And before I explain the technical aspects of Netezza, I want to just do a little history lesson of how data warehouses used to be. So in a traditional data warehouse usually has a database and server and storage separate. And you usually have to go to different vendors to get these parts, and each of these have their own cache, and every time something happens, the data has to move across all these different pieces. And so what happens is you have a tremendous amount of data input and output across these different parts. And so what we've done with Netezza is put this all in one box so that they're tightly integrated, so that you reduce the amount of input and output of the data that's moving. And we've also added an analytics component to this so that it's all in one place. And so by keeping the data from moving too much, we cut out a lot of the bottlenecks that are happening when people are using their data warehouse appliances, data warehouse. Excuse me. So what does the IBM Netezza box look like? So this is a typical view of the IBM Netezza 1000, it's a full rack, and each rack has the disk enclosure on top, and there is where we stripe the data, and we have mirror partitions and swap and temp partitions, and those hard drives are connected to the snippet blades down below, and I'll show you one in detail in the next slide. And this is now the cards where we're doing we have the CPU and we do the high performance database engine. And then in the middle what we have is our host. And what the host is set up to do is that's all you see. You don't need to see all the disk drives. You don't see all the cards. All you see is the host. And the whole system is set up to be redundant so that if a piece goes down, the rack still keeps going and able to do analysis. So let me go into the different parts here. So in the S-Blade is where we have our secret sauce. These are standard IBM X series processors with a special Netezza designed sidecar. And on this sidecar is an FPGA, a field programmable gate array. And what we do with this FPGA is we move the query into the FPGA. And I have an example about it later on. But what that allows us to do is bring the software into the hardware so that we don't have to move the data to the software. And the data is spread across all these blades, and each blade executes the query. Let me show this in a little more detail. So this is a view of our architecture, of our asymmetric, massively parallel processing architecture within Netezza appliance. So on the left, what we're showing is all the clients you can use, and it's all done through ODBC, JDBC, and open standards. You can load from your source systems using our high-speed loader from any sort of source. And what happens is when the query comes in, it goes to the host, and the host optimizes it, compiles it, and then sends it to the execution engine, which then separates the query across all the blades. Now, each blade has a dedicated hard drive with a piece of the data. And so therefore, they can then process just a small piece of that data and send it back to the host that sends the query result back to the client. And how does it do this? So here's an example of how the S-Blade streams the data. So the data comes off the drive, and they get sent in one motion to the FPGA core, which does the decompression, and the compression level is usually around 3 to 4 times compression level. And then the FPGA does some processing of that data to restrict the amount of data that is needed to be sent to the core. So it knows the query and only sends the data that's required to the core. And what this means now is that the CPU doesn't have to work to process through the data. It's given now what is thought to be the data it needs to do the analysis on. Therefore, it allows the CPU so much more time and so many more cycles to spend on just the analytics. And then the CPU sends the result back to the host. And so it's in one motion the data goes through and comes out with the result. And so this is a very key reason why Netezza is so fast. So now I want to go a little bit into where we are in healthcare. So the Netezza appliance is in over 500 customers in various industries, and in healthcare and life sciences, our customers cluster in roughly four main spaces: providers, payers, pharma, and healthcare data providers. And what I will have for the rest of the presentation is going into examples of how these different groups use Netezza and what were the challenges they had. When we talk to customers, the classic hurdles that we see, the number one thing that they complain about is that their data analytics tools are too slow for the questions they're asking. Our customers say that they have actually dumbed down their questions to match the limitations of their storage and their processing time. Furthermore, like everybody, they have constrained IT budgets, spend too much time trying to load the data, to manage the data. And in healthcare and life sciences, many times the clinicians, scientists, and researchers are doing the data management. And they're running around managing the data. And finally, what we find very common, I was just with a customer recently, and they were talking about this, multiple departments have multiple copies of the data. And so everybody wants to have that data in one place, have one true source of that data. So now I'll go into our examples of how we solve these issues. So first we'll start with providers and healthcare systems. So how do providers use Netezza? They use them in clinical operational, financial integration and analytics. They use them for comparative effectiveness analysis, and so that's when they're measuring how well they're doing with the procedures that they're providing. They're looking at incentive alignment for accountable care, and that's going to be a very big thing coming up in the next couple of years. Accountable care is a very big issue, and how to measure that. And finally, looking at outcomes analytics based on EHR data, so electronic health record data, and on claims data. And as much as accountable care will be big, outcomes analytics will be big as more and more organizations are being rated on their outcomes rather than on how much service they provide. And so therefore, these organizations are using Netezza to improve safety and quality of care, to improve their process efficiency, to interact in a more interactive way with their patients and members, and of course to reduce costs. So the first example I'd like to go into is one of my favorite examples. IBM and Premier Health Alliance are working together on a new health information platform that integrates clinical, administrative, and financial data. This was recently announced, but Premier has been a Netezza customer for a very long time. Premier is a large healthcare data provider. They have 2,500 hospitals that are part of their membership, and they send out information to thousands of healthcare facilities. And what they are doing, their major products are around benchmarking, supply chain management, and clinical and financial benchmarking. So it's very important that they have a huge amount of data and serve that in a fast and smart way. And what we've done, just a second here. What we've done, they have 14 racks of IBM and Netezza appliances. In that rack, they have over 150 million patients, billions of records on over 150 million patients with hundreds of attributes. And they're serving about 6,000 users, about 2,500 reports a month, and they're doing this over the web. So it's a software as a service. And now we've been working with them on their new framework, and we hope that there's new stuff coming out of there that will be spread out to the Premier membership. And you can see a quote here from Susan DeVore, the President and CEO of Premier, but also we have another quote from their senior architect is Chris Stewart, their senior architect, says, "What we do is to provide data to improve clinical care. You, IBM Netezza, have empowered the next phase of analysis. Our customers are touching Netezza every single day." And I have another quote from Keith Figlioli, who's the Senior Vice President of Premier, which sums up this partnership that we now have with them. "The ability to take data from anywhere in the health ecosystem, aggregate it, benchmark it, and actually impact performance in the healthcare system, and doing that in a near real-time way." And why I like the Premier example is that even though they're not technically a provider, they're not technically a payer, they are doing many of the things that the providers and payers need to do to get a better view of their clinical, financial, and operational systems. Another example is this provider. It's a large regional provider. They are one of the largest private medical practices in the U.S. They're located in over 50 locations throughout the Midwest. In addition to a patient care system, they also have an applied science and laboratory business, a clinical research foundation, an HMO, a commercial software division, and some other units. And one of their goals when they came to us was to create a better medical record system to support clinical decision-making, to contain costs through operational analytics, and to understand their workplace productivity, for example, through analysis of nurse paperwork versus patient contact time. They have their own EMR system that they created, and it contains records of over 2.5 million patients. It's all the lab and radiology results, billing claims and records, office visits, procedures, discharge summaries, including 97 million diagnoses and lab results going all the way back to 1960. And this system is used by thousands of employees, including about 800 physicians. So we were able to set them up with a Netezza appliance in 12 hours from the time the machine arrived in the premises to when it was ready for analysis, loading 12 terabytes of data. They now take all their EHR data from their system and put it on Netezza for analytics. And so the result was fast queries, which are important in life and death situations, and better analysis on patient treatments and improved workflow. What's interesting, and this is for people who are Oracle people, when they first did some trial benchmarking of the applications on Netezza, their average acceleration in the analysis across all these tests was 45 times faster than their existing Oracle system. And this is typical for what we normally see. Yet some of the queries were over 100 times faster. So now this provider wants to replicate their success in the market and market their EMR solution to other hospitals and clinics, recommending Netezza as the platform. And as the Chief Information Officer says, analyzing our financial and operational performance and our clinical information helps us provide for our patients' needs now and in the future. So let me move on to how payers use Netezza. So payers use Netezza for operational and financial analytics. They also do outcomes analytics based on EHR and claims data. They do fraud analytics and detection. They score providers. They do incentive alignment for accountable care. And they build health plan portals and do customer analytics. And the goal there is to be able to save money on the dollars that they're spending on healthcare, and to find which are the programs, which are the providers that are most effective in doing that. And this is going to become much larger as the next few years come by and the health care reform gets more evolved. So a few examples. So this is an example of Blue Cross Blue Shield of Massachusetts. And Blue Cross Blue Shield of Massachusetts, they have a mission to put their members' health first and view themselves as a transformed healthcare system that provides safe and effective and affordable care for all. And so they take a total population health approach, which allows their enrollees to create their own programs and care management programs that are tailored towards these members. Yet when they had the system that they had in place was not really personalized. They were sending newsletters to 3 million members. They had a very static web portal that was just showing some data but not really personalized to the members. And so they needed a system that allowed them to deliver engaging, personalized messages that are secure, timely, and based on their members' health conditions. So they turned to us, and we built them a data warehouse with Cognos on the front end for reporting. It's an enterprise data warehouse that has grown to 15 terabytes in size with over 1 billion claim lines. Their data warehouse is now housing a rolling 7 years of data that includes member, accounts, provider enrollment information, lab results, call data, referrals, and they're analyzing over 15 data marts that analyze and store member, account, and provider-specific metrics. And the executives think that this is a very key strategic system for them that provides them a competitive advantage. And you can see here from the benefits what kind of impact this system had. 40% increase in the traffic to their website, an increase in their registered members already in the first year, a personalized web portal, which is what they were trying to get, and also providing a comprehensive view of health data and benefit usage, both to them and to their members, that enhances the member experience and helps them understand the costs that are involved. And you can see here the chief architect talking about the combination of Cognos and Netezza, giving them the lightning-fast analytics that helps them adopt business intelligence across their platform, across their organization. This next example is of a payer that was scoring 25,000 providers on Oracle. And this led to expensive support costs for the large data sets. And furthermore, 3% of the queries that they were doing were absorbing 30% of the computing resources. Now, they had this one system that took them 6 weeks and 3 full-time people to aggregate the data, massage the data, put it on the system, and analyze it. And they could only really analyze it once. And so they could not do anything more than a few times a year, the scoring. And what they wanted to do was to this provider scoring monthly and do ad hoc analysis of the data. So when we loaded their data onto a Netezza appliance, now the process is the data loads overnight, and the analysis takes minutes, and sometimes even less than minutes. And it takes now less than 1 full-time employee to do it. So that means now that not only are they doing it quicker, but they could do things that they could never do before. And now they're moving on to pharmacy analytics, claim analytics, and cost and efficiency analytics. And we see this story all the time where the customer has data that's all over the place. There's a lot of manual processes and a lot of labor involved, and that they can only barely do the bare minimum questions that they need to ask. And then once they add their data onto an Netezza appliance, not only is the process much quicker, they can free up resources and they can do what-if analyses. And my last payer here is a large U.S. government payer. And what this organization has to do is they take 1 million claims a day and put it on Netezza, and they run custom SQL queries as requested by the Department of Justice and the OIG, and they do outcomes analytics and fraud analytics. And the Netezza boxes reduce their mainframe usage fees tremendously and has saved a lot of money in them being able to do this analytics based on their initial system. Finally, I just want to go a little bit into how Netezza is used by life science organizations. So we have a lot of life science organizations that are using Netezza in sales and marketing, Salesforce and marketing and analytics and management, in pharmacovigilance, so that's like drug safety and effectiveness. Also doing outcomes analytics to understand the effectiveness of drugs and treatments. And they're also doing operational and financial integration analytics. And we have some instances of combinatorial genetics. Here's a case study about AstraZeneca. So the managed market teams at AstraZeneca was being bombarded with requests from a very active set of business users who wanted insights right away and had many ideas for the managed market team. Unfortunately, the managed market team couldn't get the answers back in time. The information architecture that they had wasn't really working. And so, for example, when a question would arrive, the group working with payers on what would and would not be in the payers formulary, they would send it to IT. IT would spend hundreds and thousands of contract DBA dollars to tune the database, and then get back the results from the system. And so it meant that the service levels weren't being met, and the data wasn't being loaded fast enough, and things weren't being verified well enough. And so in the end, they couldn't really do what they needed to do. So these folks were really absolutely stressed. They $100,000 in tuning costs for each of these queries, and these queries, some would not even complete. And so they turned to Netezza for their U.S. commercial sales force reporting, and we had the appliance up and running in 3 days. And now they have improved results and higher response rates for the campaigns because now they can look at the data better. The money that they were spending on the DBAs can now be allocated to something more important. Their load processes are so much faster now, and their queries are so much faster. And now that means, like I said before, they can start doing ad hoc queries, and they can start hitting the wish list of queries that they had accumulated. Another example in pharma is this large European biopharmaceutical company. This was an Oracle displacement where they had an Oracle system, a 10G system. And due to the complications, they just were not, the data wasn't being loaded fast enough. They couldn't get their quarterly reports done in time. They couldn't, they had 2 or 3 database administrators to maintain the Oracle system. It was too much work. So they decided to build in their own enterprise data warehouse. And the requirements were simple. They had to support their business intelligence initiatives, provide a user-friendly environment on the company's slim IT staff, and accommodate for their long-term growth. And they narrowed the field to 2 contenders, an Oracle Exadata, 11G, and also a Netezza Data Warehouse appliance. And in the end, they concluded that Netezza was a better fit. And it was a better fit because it was easier to implement. There was a short learning curve, and they were quickly able to load the data onto the Netezza appliance and start running reports in the testing phase. And now their platform has several key business applications for international and global sales and marketing, their CRM data, their sales data from the ERP system, their logistics data, and they're maintaining executive scorecards across the company. They're using Hyperion financial reporting on the Oracle Hyperion application. And so they're very happy with their new system, and now they're thinking of doing further analysis on the data for drug safety, R&D, and so you can see the pattern on these stories. That's it for pharmacy. I can go into a little bit about biomedical research, and I just want to cover one story here. And this is one of my favorite stories with Netezza. So the Division of Pharmacoepidemiology at the Brigham and Women's Hospital in Boston is part of the Harvard Medical School, and it's a preeminent drug epidemiology laboratory. And the lead scientists are part of the International Society of Pharmacoepidemiology, and they've also created a high-dimensional computing program based around IBM Netezza. The key thing about this group is that they are part of the methods core of this FDA Mini-Sentinel program. This Sentinel program is FDA's system for pharmacovigilance, and pharmas want to actually stay ahead of the FDA. And so there's a lot of work going on to develop new methods and to understand how to do the best kind of pharmacovigilance. In this group at Harvard, they iteratively developed new methods, and some of these methods used to take 20 minutes to execute. And so that only allowed them to do a few iterations a day, so they weren't able to develop these methods quick enough. With IBM Netezza, the execution now is in seconds, which means now they can do many more iterations a day. One of the investigators, Jeremy Rassin, runs queries on Netezza, on his data, using SAS, Java, C++, and he's also rewriting all his SAS queries in R. And what I like about Jeremy is his description of his use of the Netezza box is, it just works. And one time I asked him what kind of workaround he used to do that he no longer has to do now in his work. And he said, typically when someone does pharmacoepidemiology, you'll maybe do 4 analytic runs a month because you set it up on a Friday night and you hope that by Monday morning it completed or it didn't crash. And the reason it's only 4 a month because that's like 4 weekends a month. Of course they wanted to do more, but the SAS runs take a very long time. Now they do SAS runs anytime because the SAS runs are quick. And not only that, usually folks, when they test their methods, they test it against a fraction of their data so that the run executes in a reasonable amount of time before they do their big run. Now he says the execution is so fast that he just executes against the whole database and gets an immediate result that tells him how good his algorithm is. And so that's a game changer for him. But here's the key piece, and this to me is like, a very good example of what Netezza is about. And this is why they can only work with IBM Netezza, is that they have no IT support, and they have no IT budget, and they have no help desk. The scientist, Jeremy Rassin, takes care of the appliance on his own. And that's all I've got. Rhonda, Pete, back to you guys.
Great, thank you, Charlie. Okay, we're going to now go ahead and change over to the Q&A session. And hold on one second.
So if anyone, hi, this is Nicole Gravener. I'm with Key Information Systems, and I just wanted to welcome everybody. And if you have any questions, please submit them now. You can type your questions into the questions section of the webinar control panel in the upper right corner of your screen. If you don't see it immediately, click on the orange button, the small orange box that's containing the white arrow in the upper right of your screen. Do you have any questions?
Okay, it looks like we have a question coming in right now. Nicole?
Okay. I have one question here. Charlie, do you have any provider data models?
So lots of times when we go in with Netezza, providers will ask us what kind of models we have. Building models oneself is a really hard process. We actually have a healthcare provider data warehouse model, which is a set of templates and data models that make it really easy for you to deploy your IBM Netezza data warehouse apps. And the data models help you have all the attributes and subject areas that are needed for the usual provider analytics. And we also have these business solution templates which allow you, help you build reports in whatever BI tool you have. So yes, we do have a set, and they're called a healthcare provider data warehouse.
Okay, thank you. And is there any information on the Netezza website about those models, or?
These are new. They just were released back in end of November, beginning of December, and we're working on that. We just completed a document that outlines the data warehouse, and there's some general information manuals, but the website hasn't been put up yet. We also have a health plan data model as well, which is used for payers.
Okay. Great. Well, I'll look out for those new models on the Netezza website, which will be shifting over to IBM pretty soon. Do you have the URL?
Oh, it's already shifted over. Yes.
Okay, great. So we can still use netezza.com, and it'll forward us to the. Right, great. All right. Thanks. For the next question we have here, can I speed up performance by building a larger cache?
Yeah, that's a question that we sometimes get because one of the ways to speed up analytics is to put all your data in cache. But if you think in terms of the amount of data that you're using, all the work you need to do to build up your cache and manage it, we still think it's much easier to just have a Netezza box in terms of price and performance and ease of use.
Okay, great. Thank you. I have another question here. Does Netezza work with DV2 on iSeries? Power with iOS?
Yeah, that's now getting a little bit beyond me. We do work with DB2. We have connectors, so long as the connectors are used, and we definitely have a connector with DB2. With all other databases, we have connectors, and we have many instances where people are using DB2 for part of their data warehouse for the data that's not being used for analytics, and then they put the analytics data on Netezza. So, for example, we were talking about the provider data warehouse. The atomic warehouse would be residing on DB2, and the dimensional warehouse, which is used for analytics, would be residing on the Netezza box. So, yes, we do have instances where people do that, so it's not unheard of.
In fact, Charlie, I know that in retail, the iSeries is a huge database storage, and so I know that Netezza is a great complement to the iSeries.
Okay, thank you.
The transactional data or the data into Netezza to do all the queries and
yeah, and to make a distinction, a good thing you brought that up. So to make a distinction, Netezza is really good for when you need to query all the data. For things like OLTP, where you just need to get one record, thousands of different records individually, other databases are better for that. And so usually, as you were saying in a retail setup, you'll have your OLTP database for those transaction processing, and then you'll have the Netezza that would work together to have the larger analytics. And we have a lot of examples of those, especially in the retail space.
Great. Well, thank you. We have another question here. What is the storage capacity in the appliance, and does the snippet blades, they have mirroring capability for failover purpose?
So first on the failover, yes, if a blade were to die, it affects your processing until, so each blade has its own hard drive, right? So if a blade dies, that data then has to get spread out across the other blades. And so until that happens, you get a hit in performance. The hard drives are all, they all have three parts to them. They have their data for their blade, they have data from another blade, and they have the temp space. So if a drive were to die, the data striped, and it's somewhere else, and that gets automatically spread out across the remaining drives. If a blade dies, the data gets spread out again, and then the remaining blades keep working. Recently, because it's much easier for us, we're starting to ship an extra blade in many of our boxes. And so what that means is when the blade fails, we don't have to send someone out there. So you don't have to wait for someone to come out. When the blade fails, this extra blade comes online and minimizes the amount of downtime that a person would have. And therefore, then by the time our tech comes out to help you replace the failed blade, you're not losing that impact. In terms of how much space we have, so the standard full rack is, we call that the IBM Netezza 1000-12. That has 12 blades in it and has about 32 terabytes of data, which when compressed go to about 128 terabytes of data. And we then scale linearly. So an IBM Netezza-6 is half the size of that. An IBM Netezza-24, which is 2 racks, is twice that. And we go all the way to 10 racks, which is over a petabyte of data.
Okay, thank you for that. Are you saying that there's only one failover disk in the box, or is there two?
No, there's a blade. There's an extra blade, and then with the hard drives sort out the data amongst themselves if a hard drive were to fail.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you. We have another question here. What are your integration capabilities with analytics products such as SAS Data Miner and KNME?
So long as they're using the open interfaces, they're fine. So with SAS, for example, if it's doing SQL, as long as it's ANSI SQL, it's fine. And we have a lot of people who take their SAS code, as long as there's no specific code to some platform, if they use a standard SAS code, it can run unchanged onto Netezza. And already there, people see an acceleration. But we have specific analytic routines that if SAS can call those, they can do even faster SAS analysis. So out of the box, straight standard SAS, you already get an acceleration 10 to 100-fold. If you start tweaking with it, specific to Netezza, you can take even more benefit of the parallelization. And we see that a lot with like R, where R is really good with parallelization. You get straight R, we do great, but if you do some specific routines to tweak it for Netezza, you get even more speed.
Great. Well, we're coming down to our last question. So if anyone has any additional questions, we'd ask you to please type them in now. Our next question is, what is the proof of concept process? And I can take that, Charlie, if you like.
You want to talk about it? Sure.
Sure. So typically for a proof of concept process, before we get to a proof of concept, Key Information Systems is happy to come on site and help you do sort of a pre-discovery of what your data sources are, what kind of data that you're working with today for data analytics, and do a sizing exercise relative to what your current environment is and how much throughput you have in your environment. For a POC, we prefer to drop a box on site at no cost to the company. And Netezza will come out, install the box. They'll actually teach you how to load the box with data, do the data integration, create data marts, create reports. You want to keep probably your same database schema that you have today on the Netezza box, so you have sort of an equal environment from what you currently have to what your future state in Netezza would look like. And all vendor participants that you have for data integration and business intelligence, we ask them to demonstrate sort of an SQL performance test that's predefined. One other thing, we have to create a use case. So you want to create a subset use case of what you'd like to see on the Netezza for performance and what kind of reports you want to run. So we just want to take a subset of your data in order to test that in the proof of concept. And then we actually have a whole scoping document and checklist that we can share with you as well.
If I can add two things to this, what I think is amazing about the POC is that it's a rack in your setup with your data, and often what happens is people then, once they do the initial analysis, keep doing their own analysis, and we have many examples of people who are almost getting their ROI already in the testing phase because they're starting to discover things about their data that they didn't know. And the other thing is, when we're done with this POC, we give you a full disclosure document, and it shows everything that we did in gory detail and all the benchmarking so that you can communicate that to the people who you're trying to influence to make the purchase.
Very good. And this box is on site for a proof of concept trial for 30 days, right?
Yeah, it varies. It depends what happens.
Well, that's all we have today for questions. Thank you very much, everybody, for submitting your questions.
And thank you. And we will be sending out a replay link. We'll send that out either this afternoon or early tomorrow morning. So if you'd like to replay it or for yourself or any of your colleagues. Thank you for attending today.
Thank you, everyone. It was a pleasure.
Thank you, Charlie.